Hi, I'm Snez, personal trainer, healthy lifestyle coach, and your guide to feeling your best. This podcast is a segment from my weekly radio show, Wellbeing Wednesdays, broadcast live on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM. It's all about sharing real, practical tips to help you move more, eat better, and live healthier without the overwhelm. Let's dive in, shall we? Coming up next, we're going to talk about something that isn't exactly glamorous, but we're hearing so much more about it, and it's really important when it comes to your long-term health, and that's visceral fat. So you may have heard of the term visceral fat. You may know that it's bad for us. You may have heard some things about its negative association with health, but you may not be sure exactly what it is, how you get rid of it, where is it, and what it's doing. So going to unpack all of that today. So there is a couple of different types of fat. One that is our subcutaneous fat, which is that pinchable fat, that fat that we can see. It's around our waist, but it's also around under our skin, around our arms and legs and back and everywhere. And even though that sits there, it doesn't do that much. The visceral fat, on the other hand, lives deep inside your abdomen, wrapped around organs. And while we all need some visceral fat. A healthy small amount of visceral fat is what we need for cushioning and hormonal function, but there's a huge problem when we get too much of it. So visceral fat is often called active fat because it doesn't just sit there, as I said, as the subcutaneous fat does. It acts like an organ. It releases hormones. It releases inflammatory markers that can impact our health in a lot of ways, and in a major way. So too much or high levels of visceral fat are linked to type 2 diabetes, to heart disease, to insulin resistance, to hormonal imbalance, even increased risk of dementia and some cancers. And also it can lead to inflammation in our joints as well as brain fog. So the thing is with it, though, what's tricky about visceral is you can't always see it. So you may feel that you are relatively slim or fine, and you may feel that you're not carrying that much body fat, which may be true, but you could still be carrying high levels of visceral fat. And that can be a bit of a concern because we may appear on the outside that we are looking quite healthy, but you might have a higher concentration of visceral fat that does need to go. Now, there are definite ways to measure this, whether you do or do not need to. There are some simple measures that we can have a look at in a minute. But yeah, in terms of some of the ways that you can find out is with scanners, so body composition scanners. They will always give you a reading of visceral fat. Now, it doesn't necessarily tell you, a lot of the scanners won't tell you how many kilos you have. They will give you a level range, but it gives you an indicator of whether you are in a healthy range or an unhealthy range. Now, you don't need to spend a lot of money on some of these scans. So some of the scans the DEXA scans can be quite pricey, but some of the other in-body scans and, scans that gyms may have can give you an indicator as well. The other thing that you can use to determine whether you do have high levels of visceral fat is looking at waist circumference. So with waist circumference, we want to make sure that for women, it's anywhere between sort of 80 to 85 centimetres. Or, 88 centimetres is the overall healthy number for women, but anywhere between that sort of 80 and 90, or 102 centimetres for men. So I sort of say anywhere between 95 to 110 is sort of a healthy-ish range for men that can give us a really good indicator of how much visceral fat we actually do have. So the thing is that with visceral fat, a lot of people will, once they identify with it, will want to know, well, what can I do about it? Like, how do I get rid of this thing? How do I get it out of my system? And what the good news is that you don't need to do anything different or follow some crazy detox, or you don't actually need to do anything different or drastic. Visceral fat responds really well to the basics, just like any other body fat does as well. So the things that you need to be thinking of including are strength training, because muscle helps to regulate your blood sugar levels and your metabolism. So the more muscle you have, the more you're burning, which means less excess calorie and consumed foods floating around that will need to be stored. So your body will store body fat equally, including visceral fat, all over. So being able to make sure that you're not consuming in excess because your muscles are using more through strength training, and by just having a higher muscle mass is the word I was looking for, is going to help. Cardio can help as well, because this is where we're burning more calories as well. So especially vigorous movement has been shown to be most effective 3 to 4 times a week. It doesn't need to be a long duration, even 10 minutes. If you could add in 10 or 15 minutes 3 or 4 times a week, it's going to eat into some of those glucose stores, which means there'll be less storage as body fat. Also thinking about eating balanced meals with a focus on higher protein and higher fibre meals, and getting rid of the processed carbohydrates and sugars, which again, the purpose of that is just to reduce the amount of stored glucose units that are roaming through your body. So ultimately, when you eat, your carbohydrates and your sugars get broken down into, and your vegetables partly get broken down into glucose in the system. So if we don't utilize all that glucose through movement, then that's where it gets stored, and it can get stored anywhere in the body, including in visceral fat. So the idea to get visceral fat off, it's no different to losing body fat in any other way. Sleep and stress. Now, stress is a big one. So both of these affect fat storage, especially around the abdomen area, which is going to favour storage in the visceral fat cells as well. So making sure that we're getting adequate sleep and reducing our stress levels as best as we can is going to help to get rid of it. So nothing specific, but just making sure that you are consistently sticking with the principles that you would normally implement if you were wanting to shift some weight. And remembering, as I keep reminding you, is that consistency is absolute key. So visceral fat, just like every other fat, comes off over time, and often it's the first fat that your body will burn when you get into a healthier routine, which is some really good news. So it's not like it takes terribly longer. It actually is the first to go when you are starting to lose some weight, which is fantastic. Now, you don't need to obsess over getting the scanner, as I mentioned, but it is really good to take some measurements. So whether that just be a basic waist measurement, start making some changes and see if you can make that change to your waist circumference over a 4 or 6 week period. Maybe a centimetre or 2 centimetres is something healthy and realistic to aim for. And it's worth taking it very, very seriously, because visceral fat does have a negative impact and plays a huge role in your long-term health and well-being. And a lot of the times when I'm working with people, people will come to me because they want to look better and feel better in their clothes. But when we start to analyse those visceral fat levels, our direction and our focus starts to change on reducing those visceral levels, because they are creating complications in other aspects of our life and causing illness, especially with things like inflammation in our body and joint pain and lower energy levels. And this is the thing that, as people start to lose body fat, and including visceral fat, the energy levels start to increase. We're not feeling us, or we feel like we can do more. And that has a big part to do with reducing visceral fat. So next time you hear about belly fat or visceral fat, you know what it is, where it's located, and why it matters more than what you see in the mirror in terms of your subcutaneous fat. And this is about just understanding your body and using that knowledge to empower you to make change. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, yes, most of us do want to look and feel better in our clothing, but sometimes when it gets tough to make changes, that goal doesn't seem as important anymore, but removing and reducing visceral fat to a healthier level in our bodies is something that should really, really drive us, because it is going to be the contributor to a lot of these other health and long-term medical conditions that you do want to avoid. But that's it. So you're not stuck with visceral fat. Your body wants to shift it when you give it the right conditions. So jump in and start making some very basic changes today. Thanks for joining me on this segment from Wellbeing Wednesdays, as heard live on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who might find it helpful, and subscribe so you never miss a show. Want to catch the live broadcast? Well, you can tune in Wednesdays from 12 till 2 p.m. on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM, or find my info on Wellbeing Wednesdays with Snez, the Facebook group. Take care, stay healthy, and remember, it's the little choices every day that create big changes. Talk soon.